by on a busy holiday to sit here and listen to us. But I hope you will find this an enjoyable experience. Today we are launching the book Little Things, an anthology of poetry which has been curated and selected by Angela Poon, Lo Jin Yi, and Esther. I think part of the joy of launching a book of poetry is not just in the making of the book, but it's also in the fun that we had in making the book. And though there were times of many problems that we faced about choosing poetry poems and so on, I think we had a lot of fun. And I want to thank the three editors for allowing us to do some fun. Yeah. Which is why you find that the book is a very fun book. Don't forget to get the bookmarks. I think that's the one that really is a highlight of the book, right? Yeah. Okay, welcome. Of course, just before we move on, just a few admin instructions. I guess you all may know the restrooms are this way, right? And outside we have got two booths. First Fruits Publications, they're selling the publications, and some of the writers are in this anthology. And I think that after reading the anthology, you may be inspired to want to look at what some of these other writers have written. So go ahead, purchase the books. It's being sold at a special price today. Yeah, all right. Okay, I think without any more ado, I will ask Chinny to come up and tell you a bit more about the book.
Okay, hi everybody, I'm Chinny. Thanks for coming here on your Saturday morning. Maybe I'll just say a little bit about why we did this anthology, as well as the teacher's guide that we are launching with it. I think there were just sort of two questions that we started out with. The first question we had was, why isn't there a beautifully illustrated? Okay, bit of context. I teach at the National Institute of Education, so I teach teachers, Angelia too. Esther is a teacher, and prior to this we were all teaching, so there's always a very strong educational kind of thing to whatever we do. So we kind of thought, why isn't there a beautifully illustrated anthology of Singapore poetry for younger adolescents? I think there are a lot of good anthologies out there, but you know, there wasn't one that we felt would cater to younger readers. And the second question that we sort of had would be, wouldn't it be nice if students could have an anthology, you know, rather than having a literature file or a textbook or a workbook, they actually had an anthology at home. And, you know, they could just study 20 of the poems in the classroom. But, you know, there are 80 odd poems inside. And they could pick up any of these poems as and when they're inspired to read them and really just enjoy them. When we got to working on this anthology, we sort of had about some principles behind the anthology and the selection there. The anthology, if you look at it, it's 60% Singapore poetry, 65% and 40% international poetry. I think we wanted to juxtapose the local with the global, to situate ourselves within world poetry. And also to sort of say, well, you know, we want to look at issues of universality and difference in these poems that may deal with the same ideas. When we're looking for the anthology, we also looked at for poems that were published as well as unpublished. And some of the sources we looked at included places like QLRS, the CAP annual anthology called Eye on the World, and we also issued an open call, and we're quite surprised to receive some really nice poetry that we could include as well. I suppose one other thing we also looked for was range of issues and complexity. I think later as we go through the different sections, you'll hear a little bit about the different sections and how, you know, we came together, we got the poems for each section. In addition to the anthology, I mean, the anthology was really the main thing, but because we wanted to make sure it got to students, we also worked on a teacher's guide, and you'll see it outside as well. But the teacher's guide is meant to sort of just give teachers ideas for what to do with the poetry that is in the book. And I did a count one day. I said, well, how do we keep using the same poems over and over again? You know, like how many of these poems did we actually use in our anthology? And I discovered that we sort of referenced at least 50 out of the 80 odd poems. So I thought that's not too bad, you know. If you use the ideas in the teacher's guide, you'll be able to cover quite a lot of the poems. So that's just enough of me. The way we sort of wanted to do this book launch was we didn't want the curators talking because that would be really boring, just us talking about how this was put together. We actually wanted to invite the poets to come here and share about their poetry. But before that, we actually invited Su Chen, who very kindly agreed to give an introduction to the book because he said, you know, we're buyers, right? We'll come here, we'll stand here, and we'll tell you that our anthology is very good, so please go and buy it, right? But we did want somebody who was sort of independent to kind of look at the anthology and think, you know, what's your opinion of it? And Su Chen Christine Lin, she's basically one of our most distinguished writers. She was the first, sorry, my son just came in with my daughter and my brother-in-law and my husband, so I got a bit distracted. Yeah. But, well, she was basically awarded an inaugural Singapore Literature Prize for her novel, A Fistful of Colours, and her most recent novel, The River's Song, has just been launched. So that is something you should look out for as well. But without much ado, maybe I can invite Christine to Su Chen.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Mr. Angelia and Chinny. First, congratulations. This is something that's much needed in our schools. And I am very glad. I am an independent reader. And I say it's a lovely book. Interested, buy it. I'm no longer teaching, but I'm enjoying it thoroughly. And I'll tell you why. Because after I have been reading it, I started doodling and writing, and I churned out like 6 little rhymes which I sent to Angelia. She and I used to work together in a very unhappy curriculum department. So we have gone through hardships, you know, and I am so glad to see that she is so happy now doing all these things that she loves. And this is a book I can feel is done with love. But now, officially, I will read out something. You know, I'm following Professor Tommy Costa. I have 3 points to make, and a rhyme as well. So 1 rhyme and 3 points. So the 3 points first. 1, this is a timely and much needed anthology for young people in Singapore, especially those in secondary school. An anthology that moves away from the big themes like war, nation building, colonialism, and all the isms connected with national identity and insecurity. Point number 2, the lovely selection of poems celebrates ordinary life as seen through the eyes of our poets. The themes focus on the observation of life and people around us and such universal feelings like love and loss. A sense of wonder as in Madeleine Lee's poem, Hover, on page 37. The sense of learning something in the section on growing up is explored in different poems, such as Wong Lei's poem, Only the Moon. Observations of and relationships with parents during our childhood are explored in people around us, like My Papa's Walls, Initiation, and Visits to Your Father, that talks a little bit with nostalgia about, suggesting old age or separation, and that's beautifully done. The poems are arranged from easy poems in little things to the more difficult and more complex and nuanced observations and emotions in the last 2 sections called Love and Loss and On Words. So I like, for example, Lo Guan Liang's poem on reading your poems, and Teng Qian Xi's Casualties of an Efficient World. I think these will challenge the adolescent reader, and that's very good. So I can see, maybe, if I were still a curriculum specialist in the Ministry of Education, I would strongly recommend this anthology for use in school for students aged 12 and above. And now, for the right, as my response to Little Things, an anthology of poetry. I was talking on the phone with Angelia and asked her, what shall I say? So we old friends. So while she was telling me about it, then, oh, the title, Little Things. So here's my take on it. Little things, big things, ugly things, lovely things. Things of beauty, things of light. Things that inhabit the dark, dark night. Things that make me angry. Things that make me laugh. Little things that make me happy. Like sharing a cup of coffee with a friend who holds my hand. Little things, big things, happy things, sad things. I list them all, then you will know a thing or two about who I might be inside me. Don't you think this is true? Thank you. Even if you are not a teacher, you should buy this because it will provoke you to write little ditties.
Thank you very much, Sujan. We're really glad that Sujan was able to come here and speak a little bit more about the book. I would like to just take this opportunity to thank all the poets who are here. You all just give a wave, show who you are, the various people. Students to really enjoy the book and to find it something that we would like to bring to school. So we searched high and low for an illustrator, and then we stumbled upon his work. He has a book about cockroach named Rochi, and he has done illustrations for various exhibitions, including the Peranakan Museum, and if some of you managed to catch it, the Titanic exhibition at the Art Science Museum sometime back. So we're very happy that Gavin managed to illustrate this for us. Okay, I think moving on now. We'll have the poet from the first section. I'm just going to say a little bit about Little Things. That's the section that begins the whole anthology. And why our focus there was on poems that describe the little things in everyday life, ordinary things that somehow take on poetic significance in the eyes of the poets. And really, we just wanted to inspire our younger adolescents and inspire them to see things anew and to appreciate their surroundings and find the poetic in daily living. So the poet reading his poem from this section is Aaron Lee. We're very pleased to have Aaron Lee here today. He is a poet who has published 2 collections of poetry, A Visitation of Sunlight and 5 Bright Candles. He has also co-edited 2 anthologies, No Other City, the Thoughts Anthology of Urban Poetry, which you might find outside, and Love Gathers All, the Philippines Singapore Anthology of Urban Poetry. And Aaron's poem in this section is called Cat Orchestra.
Good morning. Just firstly, just a word of thanks to the our friends at Ethos Books and to the editors of Little Things. It's an honor and a delight for me to be part of this project. So maybe just a couple of words about the poem before I actually read it. The little things that are in this poem refer to Annie and Mute, 2 longkan cats that my wife and I adopted about 9 years ago. They live with us on the 20th floor of our flat in Telok Blangah. They've never gone out of the apartment, so they are indoor cats. But like indoor cats, they tend to sort of sit around and they're very curious. And this refers to actually a photo that I took of my 2 cats who were looking out our kitchen window. It's called cat apostrophe. And obviously that's a kind of a wordplay there on catastrophe. Or is it? Cat apostrophe. Seeing a bird flash by, you leap onto the windowsill. You couldn't swallow a pigeon that fat for all that you make of it. See your arctic expanse of furred belly, soft as snow, tongue scraped in surfeit and comfort. Still, beast configured and all blood rush, you think nothing of settling under a Serengeti tree in another life. The pigeon confronts with a cockeyed stare. Suddenly sheepish, your glare for the preventive physics of class. Thank you.
Hi, the second section that we have in our anthology is titled Growing Up. And what's interesting about this section for us, I suppose, is that, we were kids and then, we're mothers, but I think most of the poems here are from kids, the child's point of view. That's about the wonder of growing up, but there's also about stuff about the disillusionment of growing up, all of those things that you lose, the loss of your imagination. But we also do have poems inside there from a parent's perspective. And if you do happen to have the anthology with you on page 55, Two Balloons by Madeline Lee is actually the inspiration for our cover design. Actually, when Gavin and I were talking about the cover design, he had a few, but not so much the cover design, but the illustrations for the poems. He basically took the poems and he said, well, I'll work with some of the poems that I like, and we gave suggestions for some of the poems that we liked and thought were suitable for illustrating. And I think the first illustration was just Two Balloons as the title. It was clearly in the title, Two Balloons, but we read it together and kind of looked at it and said, I think we really want to have that little boy running away, running away from us, and that was sort of how this illustration came about. For this section, Madeline Lee will be reading for us, and just this morning, I'm a last-minute worker. I said, I've read her books of poetry, but I don't know what I'm supposed to say about her, so let's do a little bit of check. And I went to Google, very useful, and then it got me to Singapore Infopedia, and the first line says this: Madeline Lee is an award-winning investor, manager, and poet. Like investment manager and poet? Okay, but knowing that, I suppose it wouldn't surprise you to know that her newest book combines elements of both. The title is 1.618, and it's actually being performed by Cake Theatre. They've actually translated it and into a play, and they're going to be performing it next week at the Drama Centre. But can we please welcome Madeline, please? Google stuff. Okay.
Thank you for the intro and thank you for the plug on the new book and the play. If you want to know some more, I'll be standing there. First of all, thanks to the editors for selecting the pieces, and I'm glad the piece Two Balloons has inspired the drawing, which became the cover. And just to completely embarrass my child, because that's one of his you. We're just going to ask the little boy to stand up, who's actually now very tall, so don't be shocked. His name is Kyle. I wrote this for him when I think he was 2 and something, two years and a bit. Do you go back and write a poem about your child?
Oh, I will try. I'm not very poetic.
Carl was a hyperactive kid and he would not stop moving. Sounds familiar. And he loved balloons, so this is what happened. 2 balloons. Two balloons, purple and green. Nothing more than skinny air confined in rubbery skins. But watch how they fill your face with that. Like dawn on the hills, the very, very first crack. But watch how they make your left cheek break with a singular dimple there at the left corner, like the cool of a catchment of pure water as it breaks the rock form. And watch how I shall retain this as you rush rapidly towards grown-up space. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Hi, Anne. Was that a nice poem? Yeah. Well, our third poet, he's not able to be here. He's a lawyer, and a case is taking up his time. He's Gilbert Cole. One of the strange things about being an editor is that I suppose I was in law school initially. I think I've seen Eleanor in lectures before, but then, I decided that I would spend my time doing better things and join the teaching profession. But you see, Gilbert and I were classmates, and the funniest thing was I never knew he wrote poetry. And then I became a teacher. I kept seeing his poems because I suppose he's got a very good sense of irony. I mean, he writes in a way that's easy to understand. He writes with the ironic tone kind of thing, which is why, teachers, curriculum planners, they like to pick up these poems and use it to talk about irony. So I kept seeing these poems by this Gilbert Cole, and it was only when I approached him to use durian that I realized, oh, it's Gilbert Cole, my classmate, and I haven't seen him since law school. And what is interesting about this particular poem that I'm going to read, it's called Durian. It's interesting because you don't see that sort of ironic tone which you see in all the other poems. And what I liked about it is that it just captures a moment at home, with your family. And I suppose I'll just read the poem for you, and then you can listen to it. In his place, I suppose I'll just read it. Okay, Durian by Gilbert Cole. In this season, if Pa was in a good mood, he'll come home with a gummy sack of thorny fruit, which we, the children, would gingerly roll out onto old newspapers, and then we wait in wide-eyed anticipation for some adult. We couldn't do it, to prise open with a butcher's knife the hard green shells, exposing sweet yellow flesh, on which we suck like eager babies on an offered nibble. Grandma would cluck disapprovingly, saying that too much durian makes you cough, but excitedly we pronounce, with all the experience of our tender years, on the quality of what we'd just eaten, the taste, texture, smell, the milky feel against our pinkish red tongues. Nothing made Pa happier than to know that he picked a good durian for us. So I think about this particular section, which is titled People Around Us. Initially, we had started with sort of parent-child relationships only, but as we got other poems and we kind of looked at it, we really wanted to expand it. And I think what's interesting here is that you've got parent-child, father-son relationships, mother-child relationships, but from very different perspectives, and that are sort of heartfelt, like Gilbert Cole's Durian, but perhaps a little bit more sinister in My Papa's Walks by Theodore Roth. But there's an interesting story behind this, and let me tell this story before I pass it on to Esther. The story about My Papa's Walks, let me just read this to you before I tell you the story. Okay. The whiskey on your breath could make a small boy dizzy, but I hung on like death. Such waltzing was not easy. We romped until the pants slid from the kitchen shelf. My mother's countenance could not unfrown itself. The hand that held my wrist was battle on one knuckle. At every step you missed, my right ear scraped a nut buckle. You beat time on my head with a palm caked hard by dirt, then waltzed me off to bed, still clinging to your shirt. What's interesting about this poem, and this comes out from Sheridan Blau, he's a literature educator, and he wrote this book called The Literature Workshop. He talks about how, initially when he was teaching the poems, I think in the 1960s, it had a positive reading, it was a description of basically spending time with your father. But later it took on a different sort of reading. People would read it and say, oh, it's about child abuse, look at all the violence there. The hand that held my wrist was battered on one knuckle, So it's really about, the violence that's sort of invisible, that's not clear kind of thing. So later, with all these readings, he actually went back to the author. He met the author and he said, can you tell me what is the proper reading for this poem? And it turned out that the proper reading was the first reading. It's a happy poem. But I suppose what it goes to show is that we read poetry differently in different times. So right now I'm just going to pass to Angelia to introduce our next poet.
Thanks. Our fourth section is entitled Going Places, and for this particular section we chose poems that dealt with travel, but not only physical travel or the act of migration. We also were interested in poems that dealt with imagined travel or just actually staying put and trying to imagine what it would like to travel. So you will find that we have poems like Bin by Muhammad Haji Said, Copernicus for a Singaporean Grandmother by Mina Du, she's right there. Yeah. But for today we have Dr. Leong, who will read from her poem from this section called Big Game. I think I saw the outside, yes. Dr. Leong is a poet and editor, and actually someone who my friends who studied at NUS, studied lit at NUS, they remember you very fondly as a tutor. She has two collections of poetry, Love Is Not Enough and Women Without Men. She's also the editor of More Than Half the Sky, creative writings by 30 Singaporean women, and Literary Singapore, a directory of contemporary writing. So without further ado, I'll pass that to you.
This occasional poem would not exist but for two men. Mayo Martin of today, who invited me to write a piece for the 2010 World Cup poetry spread that his paper was bringing out. And Ng Yi Sheng, a fellow poet who suggested me to Mayo Martin as a possible contributor. How was I, a woman with limited knowledge of soccer, to pen a poem about the beautiful game? I decided on an acrostic which would commemorate both the sport and the country venue, in this case, South Africa. In the acrostic poem that I wrote, the first letters of the lines form the event itself, World Cup 2010. Here it is. Big game. When I was in South Africa, it was to ogle elephants, rhinos, buffalo, roaming the reserves, grazing on shrub and grass. Lions too we caught lying in the shade, distant from their intruders. Counting down the season's games, ushered by southern winter skies. Play on, I'll say, when tuned in to watch the score. Ambush, dribble, and header over those who can't stretch like giraffes. One wild game this is, for sweaty men never allowed out of the pitch to hunt their quarry of a ball.
Thank you, Dr. Leong. All right, the next section is Love and Loss, and for this section we have 20 poems from Singapore and the region, representing different types and stages of love. So we have a poem written by Diana Joka, who is in the audience today, entitled Void Deck Romance. which shows us the young romantic teenage infatuation and its exploratory nature. Also, we have other poems that portray the loss associated with love, and this can be seen in Peter Grant's This Is Not a Love Poem, which is also a shade poem. Today we were supposed to have Joshua Ip to read his poem Trove. Is he here? Okay. So Joshua Ip will be reading his poem and telling us a little bit more about it as well. But before that, let me just give you a short introduction about him. For those of you who do not know, Joshua Ip is the author of Sonnets from the Singlish, a collection of 44 sonnets about growing up in Singapore in the 1990s. It is, however, mostly not in Singlish. His second collection, Making Love with Scrabble Tiles, consists of 44 poems on the language of love and the love of language, and is available from Math Paper Press this November. So you can find out more about this from him later on. He's currently working on a graphic novel, After the Flood, which is available late 2014. Joshua, can I invite you to read your poem, Choke?
When I was 13, 14, I definitely didn't have a collection like this of like interesting poems to read about. In fact, the first poems I read was when I was 14, and they were both sonnets, but they were war poems. Specifically, they were Rupert Brooke's The Soldier and Wilfred Owen's Anthem for Doomed Youth. So they were all about dying in World War I. So there was not very much sense of connection for me in these poems. So hopefully my current poem, which is about getting married, will have more connection for 14-year-olds. It's called Choke. The original title was Dio, but I thought Choke was slightly more accurate. Choke. Seems half the work of weddings nowadays is all about the asking. Bigger, better bangs and bucks, and every suitor sets a higher bar for better men to raise. Flash bombs, fireworks, and fighter rides. Seems the shock and awe is how a bride computes your manhood, though the snazziest of suits will sink without a rock of proper size. Is it an issue of sincerity? If over coffee, talk turns by and by towards the prospect of a HDB. Would it be disrespectable if I, or at a hawker stall, drop to a knee and place a tissue packet on your thigh? Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. I think just to say something more about his poem, when I read his poem, I really was very intrigued by it. I love his attire and the critique on Singapore society and how we go about our marital ways. Okay, anyway, moving on to the last section on words. We found it apt to end this anthology with 12 carefully selected poems that explore and celebrate the beauty of words, language, and poetry itself. Two very interesting poems that I would like to highlight here: Received Grief by Grace Chua and Ting by Angeline Yap are particularly interesting because they explore the boundaries of the English language, and for Ting itself, those who know the Chinese language, the Mandarin script, it makes references to how the different characters teach you teach you the art of listening. For this section, I will be reading Ting Tianxi's poem Casualties of the Efficient World, because she's not able to make it and she's not feeling well. So if you have your anthology, this is page 145, I think. Yeah, page 145. Let me just read a bio first. For those of you who do not know about Ting Tianxi, she was educated in Australia, Singapore, and New York. Her poetry collection, The Hill Salt Crystallizing, was shortlisted for the 2012 Singapore Literature Prize. Her poetry has appeared in various periodicals and of the arts, Raffles Girls, and is now a private tutor teaching A-level literature. Okay, I hope I do her poem justice. Alright, Casualties of the Efficient World. 22 years ago, my parents began to live across a road filled with shattered immigrants reflecting the sky of the efficient English world. 2 days before I was born,
dialect storytellers spoke the Confucian values from the airwaves like coiling malt and splintering sticks, grateful for praise in the Prime Minister's speech. Now, the illiterates die silently in old folks' homes, where someone else writes their name on their death certificate, and in quiet rooms, children are born each day. From plastic cribs, read birth cries, you name tongues, paired by the glare. Okay, thank you. Okay, we have actually come to the end of the launch. We want to thank everyone for coming down here today. We want to give a very big thank you to Ethos Books as well.